We're back. We're back in the studio. Hardware news is up now, and this one is a special episode because we're rolling in a bunch of the extra coverage from Computex, which was the last week or so, to talk about in this video, where they didn't make their own standalone videos. So that includes some clips that we shot on site, and some where we just went and collected a bunch of information from the manufacturers, some product footage, and we'll put together the report here. Now, in news this week, NVIDIA's AI discussion took 98% of its keynote. Yes, we calculated it. It was pretty easy, actually. There wasn't a lot to calculate against. And we also tear down a Sparkle GPU in this video. We've condensed that into just a hardware news thing. InWin has a case that can be activated via wand, and there's new supply concerns with hard drives, NVMe drives, and just storage in general facing the AI uprising is really not the right word. Popularity. That sounds less threatening and times Z. But we also shot a ton of interviews and discussions at Computex, lots of engineering content. So if you missed some of that, we have more coming up, and we'll be publishing that over the next couple of weeks or so. Keep an eye out for that. But let's get back into the news. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Thermaltake TR100 Portable Mini ITX case. The TR100 case has a mesh ventilated front panel, heavily perforated side and top panels, and claims to support up to 280mm liquid coolers and large GPUs up to 360mm long and 70mm thick. It even has an optional suitcase with cutouts for the system, a mouse, keyboard, and monitor for transport. The Thermaltake TR100 Mini ITX case targets portable, smaller form factor PC building while maintaining compatibility for relatively large components. Learn more at the link in the description below. Quick Computex recap first. First of all, I love going to Taiwan. It is my favorite place to go, and for Computex, super fun. So we had more engineering discussions than we've ever done at the show. We had several at the different booths, and then we also have some interviews coming up. So really excited to share all that because I learned a lot talking to some of the people who work at the companies in engineering or CTO type roles, things like that. There's one interesting one where Thermalright, for as far as I'm aware, the first time ever, had their CEO go on camera with a Western media outlet, so that was us, and we talked about some of their strategy. And it was the shortest, simplest interview. The guy gives like 5-word answers. Sometimes you get a couple sentences, but they're all very straightforward and very plain in a good way. I mean, it immediately communicates what he's trying to communicate. But that's in the Thermalright video. And then we also had Jameson from Lee, the CEO of Lee, on. We had the Fantech CTO on Tenzin talking about fan design. Noctua's Jacob Dellinger came back to talk about the thermosiphon, and then we also have him coming up twice for 2 separate technical discussions. And a lot of other people from the industry joined to talk about technicals. So that was cool. It certainly is one hell of a commentary on NVIDIA. I mean, I went to several booths after we published the NVIDIA video, and multiple companies were like, hey, just so you know, if you want to talk to our engineers on camera, there's no strings attached. You can just do it. And I was kind of like, wow, that's exactly how it should be, but somehow very refreshing. And so we did that. Anyway, love the show. We have a post on Patreon about how we pack for it and the gear we use, if you're curious about any of that. Just kind of like, hey, here's the stuff we use. And we also have a special video coming up featuring Paul from Paul's Hardware, Wendell from Level 1 Techs, and Labby from Unico's Hardware, which is a local Taiwan publication, media publication. And we worked with all 3 of them to go through different tech malls, secondhand computer stores, recycling places where they strip the components and figure out how to distribute them to be melted down, and to new computer stores basically all around Taiwan from north to south. And that'll be a fun video coming up. It's kind of neat. Also, I got to ask everyone about how the 5060s were selling, and the answer was extremely poorly. So anyway, fun show, lots of stuff on the channel already. If you missed it, you can go crawl back through it all. But we have a little bit more coming up. We're getting back to a more normal publishing cadence now, where we're coming back down from the multiple day to at most 1 a day video, and then it'll kind of back down from that too as soon as we get clear of all the content. And the travel team now, we've really got stuff dialed in. So it's Vitaly on the A cam, Mike doing most of the editing and B cam, and then me with them. And it's pretty fun because we have time off these days during the trip where we can go explore and do stuff on at least one of the weekends. And the trip itself has gotten way more manageable. We send some stuff back home to get managed here, and it's really working well. I love covering the show, and as always, a lot of fun to see all the new stuff. It seemed like cooling in cases were huge this year. We had nonstop coverage of cooling in cases. There was some silicon, But it was really just the news from AMD for the most part, a little bit from NVIDIA. Intel, I guess, had the VIA Max on the dual GPU B60. That was pretty cool if you haven't seen that. Anyway, that's it for the recap. Really quick, I also brought back the IDGAF code if you want to use IDGAF on store.gamersnexus.net for 10% off the store to help support us and what we're doing and our reporting at the show. But anyway, let's get into the news. Up first, NVIDIA's Keynote. It was 98% AI and 2% not AI. We actually, yes, we did that math, and the 2% was the 5060, basically. As usual, the keynote was delivered by CEO Jensen Huang. Most of the time was spent on AI and subsequent fields. We're going to go through all that today. And as a side note, Jensen Huang is unbelievably famous and well-known in Taiwan, to the extent that I was making small talk with some bakers in Taiwan, like a bakery, where everyone there is a little bit older, and they don't really know a whole lot about technology from what they were telling me, but they all knew Jensen Huang's name and were asking what we thought of the keynote. And one of the bakers said, "听说过他喜欢乖乖的媒体," which is like, I've heard that he likes obedient media. And I was like, oh, have I got stories for you? Anyway, let's get it. So AI, here's what Jensen said.
And then, of course, I promise I'll talk about AI.
And Huang, of course, also provided a few clips that we can't promise not to revisit.
Who doesn't want that? I want that. Can you imagine one of those little ones or a few of them running around the house, chasing your dogs, driving them crazy? No matter the modality, every single model that we know of in the world, every application that we know of should run on this. In fact, even Crisis works on here. Okay, so anybody who's a GeForce gamer, there are no GeForce gamer in the room. Whether you buy completely from us, that's fantastic. Nothing gives me more joy than when you buy everything from NVIDIA. I just want you guys to know that. But it gives me tremendous joy if you just buy something from NVIDIA.
Now, for the NVIDIA GeForce side of the keynote first, because the easiest to cover, Jensen Huang entered the stage holding an ASUS RTX 5060, as well as a 5060-powered MSI laptop. Huang described how the 5060 is able to achieve such masterful performance, claiming,
right now what you're seeing is every single pixel is ray traced. How is that possible that we're able to simulate photon and deliver this kind of frame rate at this resolution? Well, the reason for that is artificial intelligence. We're only rendering 1 out of 10 pixels. So every pixel that you see, only 1 out of 10 is actually computed. The other 9, AI guessed. Does that make any sense? And it's perfect. It's completely perfect. It guessed it perfectly. Of course, the technology is called DLSS, neural rendering.
And after 2 entire minutes talking about GeForce, Jensen Huang realized
GeForce brought AI to the world. Now AI came back and revolutionized GeForce.
And moved on, stating,
you know, when you're CEO, you have many children.
And like children, he has favorites. And GeForce isn't one of them.
And GeForce brought us here. And now all of our keynotes is 90% not GeForce. But it's not because we don't love GeForce. GeForce RTX 50 series just had its most successful launch ever.
We appreciate the feigned self-awareness, but just so we're all clear on the math here, 2 minutes out of a 100-minute keynote approximately is actually closer to 98% not GeForce, not 90% not GeForce. Doesn't sound like a big difference, but when you've only got 10 percentage points left to play with, it kind of is. Now, as far as calling the RTX 50 series NVIDIA's most successful launch ever, maybe by whatever their metrics are, maybe by sales, but we would definitely have to disagree based on how it's gone the last several months. Now, NVIDIA also announced its RTX Pro 6000 servers and GPUs. The GPUs were already known, but each RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell Server Edition GPU will have 4 petaflops of claimed AI performance, 96 gigabytes of GDDR7, 1.6 terabyte per second memory bandwidth, and each RTX Pro server connects 8 of these GPUs, and each RTX Pro server rack connects 4 of the servers, amounting to 32 GPUs per server rack by our count. One entire RTX Pro server rack consists of 32 RTX Pro 6000 GPUs, 120 petaflops of claimed AI FP4 performance, 3 terabytes of GPU memory spread across all the GPUs, 51 terabytes per second memory bandwidth, and 256 encoders and decoders. Jensen Huang announced,
Our RTX Pro server is in volume production across all of our partners in the industry. This is likely the largest go-to market of any system we have ever taken to market.
As it relates to robotics, the company announced the Jensen Thor.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Oh no, wait, sorry, that's Jetson. Jetson Thor. This is a robotics processor that just started production. Next, Jensen shared that Groot N1.5 is now open source, and finally announced Groot Dreams, which is a way to use AI, they say, to amplify the amount of data that was collected during human demonstration to train an AI model. Jensen Huang quickly moved on to discussing numerous AI-related endeavors. We'll run through a bullet list of what we felt were the most relevant announcements. NVIDIA redefined its company, again, calling itself, quote, an AI infrastructure company, end quote, that builds so-called AI factories. Jensen announced the GB300 Grace Blackwell superchip, an upgrade to the previous GB200 that uses the same architecture. He then explained how the GB300 NVL72 is assembled using 72 Blackwell GPUs. Huang announced the DGX Spark and DGX Station, two so-called personal AI computers. These are currently in production with partner models coming as well. Huang showcased the RTX Pro server and server rack, now in full production. And to wrap things up, NVIDIA announced what it calls Constellation, which is NVIDIA's newest office, and it's built in Shilin, Taiwan. In a news report by Digitimes, the next story, Seagate is cautioning against storage demand and needs for AI data centers and servers in the industry, talking about difficult to sustain manufacturing for AI processing and use cases. Seagate said at a Computex keynote that the data storage demands are outstripping supply, with supply at an estimated 1 to 2 zettabytes annual production, while the company anticipates a tripling in need for storage over the next 3 years. Seagate also underscored concerns of carbon footprint, which we'll expand on as being especially concerning since hard drives are, in particular, getting cycled out for larger capacity drives in the same physical space with some regularity. According to Seagate, 200 million drives are shredded each year. Seagate and other companies have begun attempting to securely destroy data in a way that allows them to reclaim rare earth metals in a recycling process more effectively, but we're not sure this will significantly offset the waste production. Digitimes cites a Goldman Sachs research report that projects a 165% increase in data center power demand within the next 5 years, as measured against 2023's needs. And now we'll get back into some of the consumer stuff, starting with something that's more fun. So jumping over to InWin next, the company was lacking in firm details on consumer cases at Computex. It had a lot of them. It just wasn't ready yet to talk about price, release dates. It's still kind of in the early phases of them. So we didn't have enough to work with to make a full video report without any of those details finalized, but we still had some interesting stuff. And one of them is a case that is driven by a wand. So we'll jump over to that. So InWin's latest creation is the Chronomancy, which is this case. This is, I guess you think of it as the signature series in the past, but this one is actually for the anniversary. It's the 40th anniversary for InWin. So first of all, down here, gigantic gears and like a stepper motor as far as we understand it. So you can see we're hooked up here to power. And on the other side, there's a cog that'll turn in step with the gears to open and close it. And they've built this specific wand that uses IR and then basically gesture input to do opening, music, things like that. And we don't have a price. There's supposed to be something like maybe 40, 50 pieces that they're gonna make. If you've seen InWin stuff in the past in this series, it's all showpieces, like flourishes of design and creativity. We've shown them at their offices before. So mostly it's just kind of cool. This still has a computer in it. So they've got this tower here where fan, SSD, and then we've got a block down here. And then the system itself is up top with a vertical GPU. And it looks like we've got standard ATX board up top, PCIe slots in the very top of the case, a rear fan to pull air up and out, which is really the only way it can go through. There's a speaker on this side, which we'll show in footage so we don't open it again. And then the paneling is stainless steel for this front plate, acrylic with laser engraving, and then a large aluminum base with 5 pillars to it, which InWin has also chosen for making a statement. So one interesting thing with this is the process for manufacturing the acrylic plate here, where first it's a flat sheet, they laser engrave it, and then they bend it into the shape. And just like the other Signature Series cases we've seen in the past, or the non-anniversary ones, the manufacturing process for this, I think, is part of the showcase because this seems very difficult to make. So anyway, that's the Chronomancy. Excellent name, if nothing else. And we'll check out some of the more normal stuff. All right, so first one I want to show is the Cube Pro. The layout for this, so it's like a double-decker setup where power supply in the back, it can support emergency failover. The top deck is the motherboard. The fan layout is two 80 mil fans in the rear. There's two 120s in the front, at least possible, and then one 120 in the bottom rear down here. There's also this handle. This is not a rack mount chassis, but it would be kind of like, I guess like a home, you could make a super nice NAS with this or something. And then this, so you got two hot swap, 2.5 inch in the front with a back plane for SATA power and data. And then the 5 1/4 up here. So Inwin was saying that these can also be swapped for these drive cage modules, giving another 4 drive mounts to the front of the case. The covalent was interesting, so they're taking feedback on this right now. This case isn't ready. This is a more standard case I'm used to covering. So the only feedback we had was this glass side where this looks good. Unfortunately, it makes it so that these fans can't take air in from anywhere. The next best option would be the rear side panel perforating the lower down side of it to try and pull some air through the shroud, because otherwise it has to pull through the very bottom of the case that's so far away that you're gonna need some really high pressure fans to do that. The case itself though has a little bit of the fractal torrent look going for it on the front. So this is plastic, they're probably gonna stick with plastic. Part of the reasoning being, I mean, just material cost in general. The top, they're thinking aluminum, but otherwise it is just a high airflow design, mesh front with the slats for some design element. We've seen that work really well with fractal in the past for the torrent. Side mounts, they've got two 140s in there currently. It can do 3 120s alternatively. The rear is a 140, and then the top currently has a 360 rad in it, and then very large, an SSI EEB board support here with the cable management channels in the corner there. All right, so getting into stuff that we know pretty well. So this is called the Shift. This is a test bench. It is one of the most intricate test benches I've seen. So we use typically open bench tables or the old high-speed PC ones. But there's some small features like this. So this is just a lever to allow you to reposition and actuate the fan position on the radiator mounts, which as someone who's used a lot of test benches, that's actually pretty nice. So it can mount radiators on all sides. That's what these sort of looks like a handle's for. Currently it's set up with some 360s and 120s. There's been talk of potentially supporting 140s as well. But then the other thing that the case does is rotate. So I will have Andy help with that. And it just ends up standing up like that. And otherwise we'll move over to some of the standard cases. So this is the D-Lite. Again, don't have a price. They're thinking of doing 4 fans for this. It's got aluminum accents on the sides, and the front is really the only area to focus for us. So it's got this kind of like ridged front panel. Parts of this remind me of the DGX, but mostly just the color and the mesh. And then this case is it's the View, but it's spelled with a W at the front. Now this, just to get the message out of there, this is an intentional decision, so it's not a typo. The reason it's the View instead of the View is because this sort of looks like a W. But it's 3 panes of glass. This is a mirrored finish on the front. And then the back is a mesh pane with 2 tinted glass panes to it. This one's the Tactics. Mike on the team said this looks like the thing from Star Wars. We'll put it on the screen, and now we're demonetized. And then these are the Prism cases. So I did kind of like what they're doing with this. Now, it downsides less access to air through the side, because you could technically pull some air through here, but they've perforated the top, which is good. I mean, this is nice to give access for the top fan, and then it just allows a nicer look where you're exposing more of that fan, and especially for people who are spending tons of money on fans now, maybe this is something that's wanted. That is it for this one. We'll jump over to the next stories. Up next, Be Quiet. It always sounds rude saying that company's name. It's actually, I'm so acutely aware of that whenever I have to reference Be Quiet while talking to someone, especially at a trade show, I always make sure to follow it with the German manufacturer. So Be Quiet's booth had a little bit to cover, not a whole lot. They had an experimental base for the light, B60 and 900, which is basically just like this structure that you stand the case up on top of. They also had some liquid coolers. So we previously reviewed the Light Base series. We liked it. It's a good case. The whole point of the case is that it can present a PC as sort of an old school style desktop, but the case can also be really easily inverted with its feet mounting solution. The box at the bottom that Be Quiet showed at Computex is a mock-up. The company is looking for consumer feedback on whether such a thing would even be desirable, so you can leave your comments below. They actually are going to read them. And basically it stands the case up and routes the cable through the lower channel that it creates. Now, to us, this seems like it's trying to make the case do more than it really needs to do. It's already a good case. It definitely makes it a lot larger, but it's more of a personal preference rather than a technical one, so feel free to let Be Quiet know what you think. The next section was more our speed. Be Quiet also had updated liquid coolers, the PureLoop 3 without LEDs with the cheapest model at $95, and the PureLoop LX with LEDs closer to $130 and above. The Be Quiet PureLoop 3 LX is an RGB illuminated closed loop liquid cooler that's sold as 240mm and 360mm. The LX uses a removable pump cap plate that retains a thin plastic film with a design on it, using masking to illuminate different covers. Be Quiet said that the goal was to make something cheaper than a display. The company told us that it may release files and templates in the future to allow users to create their own mask and cut it. We're not sure how big a market is for a screen like this. I guess you could let us know, but we'd bet most of our audience is performance focused first, and unfortunately we didn't get much in the way of performance details here. The non-LX version of the PureLoop 3 drops LEDs and goes cheaper at $95 to the 240 model. The cooler is otherwise the same as the LX from what we were told, just without LEDs and with a lower price. They both move the pump into the block and out of the tubes, which is no longer a worry as ASUS patent protection has expired. Arctic is up next. We actually met with Arctic's CEO to talk about tariffs in a video that's coming up separately, and they also had some new stuff at the booth. The main thing that they were showing off was a case. Arctic hasn't made a serious push in cases in a very long time. I think it's somewhere around 10 plus or minus years at this point. But they had a case to show, and they're calling it the Extender, which is one hell of a name. It sounds like something you'd see in a late night TV ad. The Arctic Extender is a gigantic rectangular box. The Extender goes for glass front and side panels, like many cases today, and is otherwise fairly plain. The case has support for two 420mm radiators, according to Arctic, and uses a glass front and side. The bottom is fully enclosed in steel, including the actual bottom of the case, with the power supply sitting on bumpers internally to try and get it some distance from the floor to get it some access to air, although it'll be coming from elsewhere within the chassis and not from outside. The case can fit two fans in the rear, plus side and top mounts. There's no intake in the bottom or the front, and the case also has an illuminated power supply shroud plate. We'll reserve further judgment and opinion on this for if we review it. Up next is MSI. This one was a field report that we filmed, so we'll drop it in here. This is a $600 computer case from MSI. And to answer the first question of, should you buy it? No, absolutely not. But it's an interesting case nonetheless, so we'll look at it. This is the motherboard tray. This actually comes out completely, and it brings with it the back of the case where the power supply mounts in here. All the cable management's done in here. So this is basically the chassis of the case, and then it can be used as a test bench separately. It has the 4 feet to go with it. So they're kind of playing around with that. The whole thing can rotate with a couple screws 90 degrees, and it can go the whole circle. So you could end up with 4 different orientations of this, and there should be clearance on all sides for the GPU, which is why they're center mounting it. Then on each side of this, there's 2 360 mounts where they currently have screens. They call these Vision 12 lights for some reason, or Vision Light 12s or something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The names are fluid. But you can fit 360s there. The board goes in the center, of course, and then otherwise for the rest of this, they're doing 3 160s in the bottom, but these are not included, unfortunately. That was majorly disappointing, I'll be honest, when they told me it wasn't included, because at like $600, those should be in there because they're kind of specialized fans. So anyway, the pricing is probably before tariffs. We're not 100% sure. The feet and top of the case, this is aluminum. So that's an expensive piece, both of these. And then up on top of the aluminum, on the top of the case, you'll see a gold colored sort of grill that's punched in there. This is obviously not an airflow focused chassis. So unfortunately, even though it's got these huge fans on the bottom. I mean, they'll brute force some amount of cooling into it, but it is still, there's only intake is at the very bottom, which is pretty distant from these fans, and the whole side, it's all this decorative paneling. So it's purely a showpiece case. For the boards, this board itself is not new, but what is the lack of protruding legs here. So they're calling this pin-in paste, or I guess it's an existing technology, an existing manufacturing technology. So pin and paste is different from SMT. Normally we filmed like SMT lines, which is surface mount technology. And for SMT lines, they have pick and place machines. They pump down a ton of small components, send the board through the line, and send it over like solder, molten solder basically to flow it all. So this is a different process. I'm not familiar with it or how it works, but basically it's just getting rid of any of the protruding parts except for things like screws, and then they've still got caps and MLCCs and stuff like that, controllers, things like that are still sticking out, but not as much as the other boards. The other small thing I guess related to this, MSI said, is they're moving all the fan connectors away from the RAM slots, and I'm going to give them credit. This is a really small attention to detail thing, but the reason was when they put them here, sometimes people push the release and then jam it into their finger. So, I mean, I would make fun of that mercilessly and say, wow, how do you know when you've run out of ideas for how to market your motherboard? But I'm not going to make fun of it and say that because I have done that. I have definitely been stabbed several times by releasing those slots, so credit to them for that. The actually interesting thing about this board is that it's an MPOWER board, so they're bringing back this branding. It's been a long time. This is a B series MPOWER board. This is a B850, and they're going with a 12+2+1 layout using 60 amp power stages. It doesn't have an active fan or anything, doesn't really need it. Massive heat sinks here. It's not finned the way you'd want to see diced like that for like the highest performing heatsink, but they do have a good amount of surface area punched through across the other way, which you can kind of see here. And then otherwise it fits 4 M.2 devices. So this micro ATX board does 2 Gen 5, 2 Gen 4. They shove a couple of them in here. There's one that goes there. And then on the back side, there's another one that can socket right there. This does not have a price yet. They say it's supposed to be price competitive. Apparently it's supposed to compete with the ASUS Apex boards. And one of the things that the Apex boards do that this is also doing is 2 DIMM slots. So that gives you 1 DPC, 1 DIMM per channel, and that helps significantly with memory overclocking for people who are memory enthusiasts. And part of the reason is just eliminating the complexity of the extra slots. You get everything closer, all the trace routes are shorter, and they can just run the 2 for maximum memory tuning potential. Top PC is still working on an overclock for that. He's one of the world's leading memory overclockers. He works for MSI, so he's still working on that. But that's kind of what they're doing. They're targeting the Apex, basically. This is MSI's fuck you to ASUS and the Apex series. They have not given us the price yet. That is the biggest key here, because MSI says because this is B850, it should be more price competitive than the X870 boards without sacrificing too much, they say. And they also have another case that I wasn't too fond of, so we'll skip that one. But this one is the Maestro case. It's the Maestro 900L. As for the other case that I didn't particularly care for, that is called the 130RPZ. And finally, we ran around the show floor at the end of the show to collect some additional footage. So while Vitaly and I were working with a couple of the other companies on the final interviews and discussions we did, Mike ran around to collect footage of an FSP fan, a Zalman cooler, and a colorful case. The brand. The case was not colorful. It was actually very plain. We didn't get a lot of information on these items, so as quickly as possible, FSP had this fan with a display on it. The rep at the booth didn't know many technical details, unfortunately, so all we really know is that it has a digital display with RPM and temperature. Zalman had a modernized throwback to its old spiral copper coolers with its new ZET3, 4, and 5 coolers. These circular coolers will be less effective than more modern shapes, but try to integrate a certain look with okay cooling, in theory. We'd have to test them to know if they're any good. Colorful had its Neptune PC on site. The strange semi-open case applies the company's Neptune GPU styling to a case, presenting the GPU vertically and on a riser, with RAM protruding from the chassis shell that covers the motherboard. And finally, this one is a field report from Sparkle at Computex, where we did a teardown of some of their GPUs. One was a B60, which is the new Pro Series. They all use G21 silicon, but it was the Pro Series card. And then the other one was their new, not yet out, Luna Rock OC B580. Okay, so we've got 3 cards here in front of me plus a PCB. This is the passively cooled Arc Pro card. This is a new B580 that Sparkle's working on. They're bringing the EVGA names back. It's the Rock Luna OC Ultra. And they're also working on some new software, OC software, which is also good to see. So let's start with the water-cooled card. This looks to be a Bits Power branded block. So Sparkle said it was considering trying to make a block for B580, but as you would expect, cost becomes a concern. You're gonna have like a $250, $300 card, and then you're gonna put $100+ of water cooling on it. That was quick, okay. So it dropped off there. The PCBs, so Intel provides a reference design for the board and for the VRM. The cooler designs are what the partners are changing. Now, the thing that's jumping out at me is this supposed to be a B60?
Yeah, this is B60.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is supposed to be a B60. So we've got no memory modules. This is an engineering board, I guess. So you can actually see the ball grid array where the solder balls would attach to the GPU. This is actually pretty cool to see. You don't normally get to see this side of it. It's even the L-shaped. That's got to be for Luna, right? Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great marketing.
Yes.
Lots of people will see it.
White water block.
Yes.
Perhaps.
Perfect. so that's what it should look like when it's completed. So like I said, G21 silicon, memory should be dual-sided, which this one is. They did, however, put the VRM on it. So this must be basically what Intel delivers, I would assume. But looking at the block here, so nickel-plated copper cold plate. It looks like the micro fins are screwed in separately back here. There's thermal pads where the MOSFET line is, where the inductors are, and of course where the memory is on at least one side. The back has thermal pads for the backside memory, which is good. That's what we need to see. For the rest of the block, it's pretty standard. See the micro fins through it. There's the gasket down there underneath. I'm not going to take all that out, but it is what you would expect a water block. Let's do at least one more. Let's do this card. This is the Sparkle B580 Rock Luna OC Ultra, which I'm going to keep saying. All right, 4 screws here secure the heatsink to the GPU itself. These are going through into the fin stack. Okay, looks like that's all of them. Last one. All right. So full white PCB across the whole thing. They've got a bodge wire here, same as the Max on one head. Do you know what that wire was for?
Oh, this is because engineering sample.
Yeah.
Yeah, for debug.
Oh, debug.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so apparently debug wire. You can see the Captain tape right on one side to the other. That's kind of cool. So yeah, reference Intel VRM, thermal pad on the MOSFETs, of course pads on the memory. We've got an RGB hookup over here, so that can feed into the system and synchronize with the motherboard or the rest of the computer. They have an MCU on it. There is some kind of engineering marker up here that I don't understand. And this one does, in fact, have a GPU on it. So let's just go ahead and finish this teardown completely. And we'll take a look at the backside, too. I'm going to leave the fans connected on this one. So some attention to detail there on the white washer. That's kind of nice, small touch. That looks like a probe point. Okay, cool. Should be free. So Backside, no memory on the back of this, is a B580. And then, as we saw earlier, it's 2 8-pins. This does remind me, though, I'll comment on the engineering sample Pro Series card here. I was telling Sparkle just some constructive feedback for their engineering sample. They could probably save like several pennies worth of solder in the future on these two. And then especially on this where we've bridged it. But again, this is an engineering sample, which Maxon's also was. So, cool. I mean, that's pretty much the whole board. That's it for hardware news this week. Ton of fun, as always, going to the show. That, I think, recaps everything that we had collected and not published, other than the separate pieces that we still have going up, most of those being interviews, engineering discussions, things like that. And again, thanks for watching all of it. It's been a really fun time covering it. We're going to get into some of the reviews and technical content, in addition to all the other technical content we just did, but with testing coming up over the next few weeks as soon as we clear all the discussions. And we've got a couple of those planned and in the pipeline already, including a pre-built review of one that is better than we expected. So check back for that. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersaccess.net and use code IDGAF to get 10% off and help us out directly. And we'll see you all next time.